Hi, and welcome to Kidney Plugged In. November is Diabetes Month, and on the show today, we talk about the link between diabetes and kidney disease. And we have part 2 of our interview with Dr. Nickerson, the co-chair of the Kidney Foundation's Research Council, which governs the research granting process. Dr. Nickerson joins us today via Zoom from Winnipeg to explain how the Kidney Foundation's research funding and grant process works. So make sure you stay with us because Dr. Nickerson joins us next, right here on Kidney Plugged In.
Dr. Nickerson, do you and the research community see any really exciting key opportunities in the kidney health and organ transplant research fields moving forward?
Right, so that's a loaded question. It's so massive, like you can think about all the things that are going on. I think one of the things that I've really seen happen in Canada is, we were talking earlier about networks of researchers. In fact, there is a national network in kidney research, and this group has really come together, and many of them are former Crescent trainees, allied health doctoral fellows, and they together are having large-scale plans that's being funded by the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, where they're looking at various aspects of kidney health. So early detection has become a real top priority. And there's many groups in various types of communities, not just urban communities, but rural, remote communities. How do we actually screen these individuals early for kidney disease? And a lot of research has been going to develop the technologies for that, to develop what types of things should we be testing for, how should we be screening early for kidney disease? And then once we detect that, what's the research that we have to how do we intervene, right? How do we actually either get them onto proper diet, right? Exercise, things that can improve their processes, like how to treat hypertension through non-pharmacologic means. How do we, early on in diabetes, how can we control the blood sugar better? So there's a lot of research in these aspects around prevention, if you will, early detection, prevention. And can we tell somebody how long it's going to take for them to get to the point where they might need dialysis or they might need a transplant? So there's a bunch of researchers in Canada looking at developing models or equations that actually say, okay, you're 50 years old, you have this blood pressure, you have this kidney function today, you have protein in your urine, or you don't. How do we integrate all that information together to try and predict the future and give you some sense of where things might be going over what period of time? So that kind of research has been, actually, Canada has been leading in many of these areas of research. When we talk about organ donation, another area that's really important, obviously, for getting kidney transplants available for our patient population. There's a lot of research going on through national networks that are looking at how do we preserve the donor organ optimally so that it can last the longest once we put it back into somebody. And so there's a lot of research going into protecting the organ. How do we actually start thinking about the next phase, which is actually start treating the organ before we put it in to make it work better, more optimally. So there's a whole area of research that's really exciting there. And other research that's going on is really looking at not only working in humans, but going into smaller animal models, right? The idea that, we have a model system of a disease that we see in patients. Can we actually identify the fundamental biology of that disease? And so there's a lot of our PhD scientists doing that kind of research. And the interest there is that they identify new targets, right? That if we identify the mechanism of how that disease is coming about, then maybe we can design a drug that can address that problem. And that drug might take many years to come to fruition, and it may take many years through different types of federal funding and ultimately in collaboration with the pharmaceutical industry. But you can bring these new drugs to the clinical community. And we've just had this last couple of weeks at the International Cardiac Convention, where the scientists were sharing the results of some recent clinical trials looking at these novel drugs that have come out. Now, these weren't necessarily coming out of Canada, but this is an example of what the types of research that we're investing in, where these novel drugs, T2 drugs, actually are showing that they can slow the progression of kidney disease, and they can actually improve heart health in individuals with kidney disease. So this kind of it's really exciting to us in the clinical community that we now have a new class of drugs that actually can improve clinical outcomes for patients. But that started 20 years ago in basic research. And so what we're interested in, and many of what the Kidney Foundation has invested early on, is some of these early discovery type grants that, yes, we can identify something novel. And while it may take us a while to get there, it ultimately will potentially either delaying the rate of progression or leading to improved clinical outcomes.
More coming up with Dr. Nickerson in just a moment, so stay with us.
Hi there, and welcome to Did You Know? Did you know that November is National Diabetes Month? And did you know that there is a link between diabetes and kidney disease? In fact, diabetes is the leading cause of kidney disease. So how does diabetes affect the kidneys? Well, first of all, diabetes damages the blood vessels. High blood sugar clogs all blood vessels, including the filters of the kidney, and this causes decreased kidney function. Diabetes also does damage to nerves and can cause infections. High blood sugar can also damage the nerves that tell you when your bladder is full. A full bladder can cause the urine to back up in the kidneys and cause further damage to the kidney filters. This can also lead to increased bladder infections. But did you know there are ways to support your kidney health? Let me share a few tips with you. First, talk to your doctor or nurse about what your target blood sugar level should be and when and how often you need to check it. Testing your blood sugar as often as directed by your healthcare team can really help ensure you have good control over your blood sugar levels. Be sure to maintain a healthy lifestyle and weight, and control your cholesterol through proper food choices. And if you are on any medications, make sure you take them as directed by your doctor. Don't forget to manage your blood pressure. Don't smoke. And finally, make sure to have your kidney function tested annually with an eGFR test. Hey, and now you know.
Hello everyone, we're back here with Dr. Nickerson. So Dr. Nickerson, I'd love to know from your experience, what are some exciting outcomes that you've seen through research in the previous years?
Yeah, sure. So in our own research, we've been looking at a couple things. When we do a transplant, some of our research that was funded early on by the Kidney Foundation was around how do we make sure that the donor and the recipient are compatible. So we look in the blood to make sure that the recipient hasn't developed antibodies towards the donor, because that would cause an early rejection in the transplant. And so the Kidney Foundation funded us to develop that assay further from what it had been. And we became one of the first places in Canada to develop it. Now everybody's using it. And we're seeing that by using and applying what's called a flow cytometry-based cross-match, we're having better outcomes in our transplant. We're avoiding these early rejections. And then the other thing that led to was it led to us saying, you know, a lot of patients are very difficult to get transplanted because they have so many antibodies in their blood. They can only find one donor that might be matched to them, given 1,000 donors, right? So how does that one donor get to that patient that needs that one kidney because they have the right tissue type and the recipient doesn't have an antibody to them? And that led to us taking this technology, saying this has to be the standard of lab practice across the country. And when we did that, we then were able to get the government to support Canadian Blood Services to develop the national sharing programs for kidneys. And so we now have a national highly sensitized transplant program. So if you have lots of antibodies in your blood, you get on the national registry. And if a donor is available anywhere in Canada that is predicted to be matched to you because you don't have an antibody towards them, then that kidney will be shipped to that recipient. And we've done hundreds of transplants now across Canada for people who had been years on the wait list, waiting for that perfect match because they could never find it. And now they actually are getting transplanted. And so I think the longest we had was someone who was like 16 years on the wait list, waiting for that perfect match. And once the program started sharing kidneys in this way, they were able to get their match and get transplanted, when people thought they were never going to get transplanted because they couldn't find the needle in the haystack. And that same technology also allowed us to set up the Living Donor Paired Exchange program through Canadian Blood Services. So this is where, my sister wants to donate to me, but she can't because I either have antibodies towards her or we're not the right blood group match. But we can go into this national kidney pair donation program, and that program then can find another couple that are incompatible to each other. But you know what? My sister could donate to, say, some other individual, and that other individual's donor could donate to me, right? And now we both get transplanted. And what's really interesting about that is that even though my sister didn't donate to me, many of the patients will tell us, it still feels like she did donate to me because without her, I never would have got a kidney, right? So that whole program came about because we did research to figure out how do we standardize all of our lab practices to create a very reliable diagnostic tool that could say that, yes, if I ship a kidney across the country, it will in fact be compatible to the individual that we're shipping to. So that's an example of how Kidney Foundation invested early on 20 years ago in our research. And that, not the only thing that led to it, but it was a foundation that we could build on to then develop the national sharing programs, both through kidney pair donation and the highly sensitized registry. So that's an example of the power of research to really create solutions for patients that now is leading to hundreds of people getting transplanted that otherwise weren't going to get transplanted, or allowing donors that were, because they were incompatible, would have been turned down. But now they're allowed to go in and be a donor through the kidney pair donation program.
Well, it's really exciting to hear you kind of address, just in 20 years, all the outcomes we've been able to have to increase access to organ donation.
Yeah, no, I think Canada has recognized that we're not performing near the top in organ donation, but, through these types of things, we're moving ahead. And we're getting people transplanted that previously were not having access to a transplant because they couldn't find that needle in a haystack.
And again, I really like how you address the variables from looking at research from the prevention side of, when we have risk factors or right before they start developing serious kidney disease, looking at that risk factor and that prevention process all the way over to organ donation as well.
Yeah, no, the Kidney Foundation has a very broad mandate in its patient-focused research. So I think it's really one of the key organizations in Canada to help patients with kidney disease.
Let's see, so kidney is a... These are my grandpa's kidney stones. They're very precious. Kidney is a bone in your back that helps you turn. I don't know, to be honest.
They don't know kidneys are vital, do you? Get the facts at kidney.ca.
World Kindness Day is being celebrated internationally on Friday, November 13th. The objective of World Kindness Day is to highlight good deeds in communities, focusing on positive power and the common thread of kindness that binds us all. And what a perfect opportunity this is to recognize Kidney Foundation volunteers, healthcare workers, and members of the kidney community who exuberate kindness, care, and compassion in everything they do.
The cold is finally gone. Well, I've been waiting for someone like you to come along. I was going down a road so dark and full of demons, I lost my ground. My heart was stuck in hibernating, stuck in the ice where there's no feeling. You shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me. You shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me. You shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me. You shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me. You shine on, you shine on, you shine on, you shine on me.
So Dr. Nickerson, we're living in a very different time right now, in the time of COVID-19, and I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts on how this pandemic has impacted kidney patients and also how it affects the field of research and the work that you folks do.
Right. So, COVID's been very trying from the perspective of, and I have sort of a unique perspective being the Vice Dean Research at the university. When COVID hit in March, we had to shut down all of our research labs because we weren't really sure how we were going to best deal with this. So we went down to a very skeleton version of ourselves through end of March, beginning of April. At the same time, I'm also the director of Transplant Manitoba, the medical director of Transplant Manitoba. And so we had to deal with what are we going to do for our patients who are immunosuppressed in the face of a pandemic. And so in a similar manner, we started looking at how big was the community burden of COVID. And I can tell you across Canada, we went into a mode of ramping down, first of all, living donor transplants. We sort of canceled them early on because we recognized that we didn't have all our testing or our PPE or our pathways in the hospitals in place to protect the patients optimally as we would like to have. And so all of the living donor programs pretty much shut down. And the deceased donor kidney programs, it really was about ensuring the protection of the patient by making sure that the donor didn't themselves have COVID, right? Because while there's very little evidence that a donor can transmit COVID through an organ transplant, we didn't know enough at that point to know what we could or couldn't do. And so the Canadian community, we've been talking networks, all the organ donation and transplant community was on a weekly phone call talking about how do we set a policy and a procedure to optimize organ donation and at the same time protect our recipients. And so we went through a whole phase of ramping down and then ramping back up. And what I would say now is we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about PPE. I think the whole world has learned about PPE and masks and whatnot. But we've worked with the hospitals to create what we call green zones or pathways where a patient, it's safe to come into a hospital. It's safe to go through a surgical procedure. It's safe to be on the ward. The risk of transmission of COVID is very low within the hospitals. And so with that, we could safely reopen our both our living donor programs, our deceased donor programs have become more optimal. And what I'd say is we did have sort of a lull, but we've now come back up. And I can tell you in Manitoba, we've been doing catch up with our living donor programs. All the living donor transplants that we paused, we've now managed to get through surgery and to have those transplants take place. So that was an impact on our transplant and donation community. And then more importantly, I think it's also been as we've reopened not only our research labs, because they've all reopened now, because we've again learned the same how to create a protected pathway for being able to conduct research in our universities and in our hospitals. But for our patients in general, not just transplant, how do we make sure that patients were scared to come into hospital? They didn't want to come to clinic. And so we've actually learned how to do virtual visits. For the same way we're doing a Zoom meeting for this interview, we are having virtual visits with our patients. So they'll go to get their blood work done in a lab, and then we'll have a call with them. And in fact, it's going to change medical practice, I think, in general, because now our patients are like, well, I don't want to come to the hospital when this is all over, I like having these virtual visits. I like the fact that I don't have to travel to see my physician or to talk to my medical care team, right, with my allied health workers. And so that whole concept of virtual care or telemedicine, I think is going to explode, and it's not ever going to be the same again. And I think that's for the good, actually, in some ways, because, in Manitoba, we would have patients traveling from the far north down to Winnipeg to get seen. Well, now we're doing virtual visits and caring for them in their communities. And I think that we're going to, as we've built capacity for that, this was always coming. COVID has accelerated that by several years. And I think we're going to maintain that going forward. Now, obviously, there's always going to be times when you need to see a patient in person. And so we've, again, worked towards, and the whole country has been doing this, working towards making sure that when patients do come to hospital or to clinic, it's a safe thing for them. So it's impacted not only clinical care, it's impacted our research, but I would say that we've learned how to deal with it. We've learned how to create safe environments. And nothing's going to be perfect, but I think we're doing a great job now in the country in moving our research along and moving our clinical care along, despite these trying times, which I think is going to be with us for a little bit yet.
We'll be back in a moment with Dr. Nickerson, so stay right here.
Hey, honey, I lost the list for Jason's birthday thing. Obviously, hamburger, cakes. No, not hamburger cakes. Hamburgers and cake. And buns, sausage.
Talking. Ooh, eye candy.
Is it a full moon tonight? People are being weird. And don't forget to make the Facebook event private this time. Okay, bye.
Can you imagine losing most of something without realizing it? Over time, kidney disease can destroy up to 80% of kidney function before you notice any symptoms. Talk to your family doctor to see if you're at risk and need to be screened. It could save your life.
Is there anything else that you would maybe like to highlight about kidney research, the importance of funding it right now, or other KFOC funding programs?
Yeah, so I just want to maybe go back. A lot of the research that gets, like my own research, it got initiated through the Kidney Foundation, either through training programs, where I've had my own students go through the Crescent program, or an operating grant from the Kidney Foundation. And that, when we talk about scale, we can think about how big is this money? Well, a Kidney Foundation grant, $60,000, used to be 50, now it's 60 for a couple of years. That money as seed money launches so many great projects. And what the investigators are able to do is to take that money, get the data that they need for their ideas and their research, and then turn that into a bigger grant through the federal government, like the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. And what that's doing is leveraging millions of dollars, right? So the amount of money that the Kidney Foundation, it might be seen as not big enough. I would say it's great. It's seeded so many great ideas, and it's leveraged many millions of dollars of research into kidney health. This is a very critical role that the Kidney Foundation plays, because many times the federal agencies say, well, come to us with your big idea, right? But if you don't have that preliminary data, if you haven't done some of the initial studies that you need to do, and you don't have money to do that, then you can never get the focus on kidney health from the federal government. So I think what the Kidney Foundation allows many of the researchers in Canada to do is to launch their careers, launch some new ideas that you have, and get it to the stage where you can actually leverage many more dollars. And so I view the Kidney Foundation, if we want to have research with a focus on kidney health, if we don't have the Kidney Foundation, if we don't invest in the Kidney Foundation through our donations, there will not be that national focus in kidney health research, because many of those ideas came out of funding from the Kidney Foundation.
So Dr. Nickerson, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, thank you, and it's been a pleasure to talk about the programs at the Kidney Foundation, the exciting things that you've been investing in and will continue to invest in. And I look forward to the opportunity when we can all get together again and celebrate some of the things that are going on inside the kidney health research community.
Hi, I'm David C. Jones, and I'm here with Sydney the Kidney on Talking Kidney, and we're going to share some very important facts with you about how you can register to be an organ donor. Did you know one organ donor can save up to 8 lives? Did you know that you are more likely to need a transplant than you are to become an organ donor? Did you know that donation is only considered after all life-saving efforts are made and it's certain you will not survive? Did you know 2 doctors not involved with the transplant must declare your death before organ donation can even proceed? Did you know any British Columbian who is 19 or older can register the decision about organ donation, and parents can register their children? Did you know that you only need to register your decision once? Did you know that a decal on your driver's license or care card is no longer enough? Did you know that you need to be sure to register your decision about organ donation at transplant.bc.ca or kidney.ca? And now you know. Now they know.
You gotta step out of the darkness if you wanna see the light. You gotta learn you can't get it wrong if you ever wanna get it right. Let me be your lighthouse if you ever lose your route. Let me be the one to guide you, yeah. Let me shine on you.